bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening. How you doing? How you doing? It's Fade to Black. Yeah, today is Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. Very excited about the show. Dr. Lynne Kitei is with us, and my headphones are tangled up around my feet. We are going to talk about the Phoenix Lights tonight, and she's one of my favorite people on planet Earth, and I'm very excited about the show. Now, there's something before we get started. Every show that I have done with Lynn over the years, and it's been a lot, it's always been without video. Yeah. Tonight, we've got Lynn for real. I'm so excited about this. So we'll get to Lynn in a second. Last night on the show, we've got a great week here on Fade to Black. Last night, Dr. James Beecham was with us live from Geneva, Switzerland, from CERN last night. That was a very unique show and a very interesting conversation. It was great. Tonight, Lynn is with us. Tomorrow night, Leslie Mitchell Clark is here. We're going to be talking about ET hypnotherapy. And I know I said I would never do it. I ended up having a session. So tomorrow night, Leslie is with us. We'll be talking about ET hypnotherapy. And then Thursday night, a show that I've been trying to do and waiting for over 10 years. Britt Elders is with us tomorrow night. And we're going to be talking about her 50 plus years of research into the subject and what she has learned. Tomorrow night, Thursday night, Britt Elders is with us. Now, I've got 6 major events coming up in the second half of 2024. All the links are below for each of these events coming up. May 11th and 12th is the Anunnaki TV premiere at the largest theater here in Los Angeles. That is the Regal Cinemas, downtown Los Angeles, with Billy Carson. Then I've got Disclosure Fest Stairway to the Stars at Castaic Lake out here in California. That is the weekend of June 10th, 11th, and 12th. Then I have the Conscious Awards, the 2024 Conscious Awards, all the way out in Miami, Florida. That's August 3rd and 4th, that weekend. After that, it's the Contact at Sea Cruise to Alaska, and that is September 6th through the 13th. I come back from that, and then I head over to Egypt for the 4BK tour of Egypt. That's October 3rd through the 14th on my birthday. Again, this year, I'm spending my birthday in Egypt. I'm very excited about that. Then I come back from that, and I turn around and head to South America, where I will be going back to Peru and Bolivia with Brian Forrester. And again, we have limited seats on all of this. The Peru tour, I think there's only three spots left on that tour. They may be gone. You can check on that. Same thing with Egypt. I think that may be sold out. And the Contact at Sea Cruise to Alaska, all the same situation. So head to the websites and get your tickets and information now. Everything is selling out. All right. Now, where am I? Oh, tonight's show. This is show number 1970, 1,970 shows in the can. And it's a very special night because Dr. Lynne Kitei is with us, and we're going to be talking about the Phoenix Lights. Show number 2,000 is coming up on us pretty quick, and Renee had sent me an email about it reminding me it's coming up so fast. show number 2000, and that'll be a fun night of celebrating. So, but tonight it's show number 1970. That's a cool number. And Lynn is with us. Tonight we're going to go inside the Phoenix Light story, how it unfolded. We're going to cover all of that. And fast approaching the 30-year anniversary of the Phoenix Lights. She is an internationally acclaimed physician and health educator with over 50 years of experience. What? That's a typo. 50 years of experience. She graduated medical school when she was 2. Nah, can't be right. But everything changed on March 13th, 1997. That's right. The Phoenix Lights happened that evening. She has appeared on CNN, ABC, CBS, Fox News, of course, Netflix. She's got the best-selling book, Phoenix Lights, A Skeptic's Discovery That We Are Not Alone. She also produced the award-winning documentary Phoenix Lights Beyond Top Secret. And she also created a Phoenix Lights graphic novel activities coloring book for the kids. He's the best. And I would like to welcome back the one and only Dr. Lynne Kitei. There she is. There she is. She's right there. Hey,
there.
Hey, Lynn, we've known each other for so long. But it just hit me. We've always done phone interviews. Isn't that weird? Tonight's the first time that we've been able to do this. And I don't know why. But anyway, welcome back. How are you? How's life?
It's wonderful to be here. It's such a joy. And by the way, in 1970, I was touring. I was understudying Barbara Eden in Sound of Music. And I also started medical school in 1970. So,
and you were 2. You were 2 years old. 2 years old. 50 years. Where, when you look back at your career and your life, and these kinds of numbers are thrown around, I do it, right? How does that make you feel? Because you look, you act. Your mind is of a 25-year-old. Do you feel like the years that 50 years has gone by? It's weird, isn't it?
Just a number. I feel terrific, and I have to tell you, the Phoenix Lights really changed my life. I have to say, into a completely new direction, and it's just been a joy. I mean, meeting wonderful people like yourselves, and everyone that I really, the journey has just been incredible, and the story is incredible. I did not want to come forward. My medical career was very accomplished, and it's not about me, it's about the data, and that's what really got me, because as a scientist, after thousands of people saw what I had been seeing for 2 years prior, up close and personal in 1995, right outside, literally and figuratively, right outside our bedroom window, was my first experience with the Phoenix Lights in 1995. Anyone that's near a computer and get onto the Phoenix Lights Network website and go to the photo page. I have a very unique collection of 35 millimeter photographs. Jimmy, no one has 35 millimeter of these phenomena, which only propelled me more to find out what the heck was going on by military, by university optical experts, and no one can give me an answer. If anything, they've established that what I have photographed on 35 millimeter, it's in the negative, are true unknown. So what do you do with that? And anyway, up till that point, I had dedicated my life's work to community education of vital health issues. I have a company in 85 that health education learning programs to produce video and workbook curriculums on vital health issues like AIDS and teen pregnancy and substance abuse prevention education, mainly for the classroom. Discovery Education was distributing them. And then this fell into my lap. And as a scientist, I wanted to be pragmatic and really prudent with the data. But as a physician, once I saw it myself, I'm an experiencer, so I knew that thousands of people experienced something that was real to them. And even though most anomalies can be explained, only a small percentage cannot. Just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, it doesn't mean they're not real. I always say it's just like looking on the AM dial for an FM frequency. So ultimately, once thousands of people saw what I had been seeing for 2 years prior, and we can talk about that because it's a really interesting story, in 1997, I pushed my whole medical career aside to try to find a logical source and meaning for what I had witnessed and photographed. And I've yet to find it. If anything, what I did find, because I knew nothing about this topic, was so mind-boggling and compelling that ultimately a 750-page journal later, 7 years later, and I did stay anonymous. What do you do with that? I just, in good conscience, couldn't stick it in a drawer. And as a physician, I wanted to let people know that they're not alone. Not only the fact that they're not alone and that they've seen something that was really spectacular, but also not alone in that when someone has a paranormal experience, it's real to them. And it festers if you don't share. So I always invite people either on Facebook or go to the Phoenix Lights Network website to share with one person. It's cathartic. It's healing. And certainly as an experiencer, I know what that's like. And as an educator, finally, after 7 years, I finally came forward in 2004 to share the data and let people decide for themselves. But the story itself, as you mentioned, is really fascinating in and of itself, and the data is very compelling.
There's a couple of twists to this as we get into this evening that I find very, very, very interesting. And I'm going to start with this before I turn it over to you. I was in Phoenix that week during the Phoenix Lights. Okay. I come home. It happened on a Thursday night on the 13th. I flew back into Burbank on Friday, and I got home. It was in the evening. I get home, I walk in the door, I drop my luggage, same thing that I was in Phoenix every couple of weeks on business. And I drop my bags, I walk into the living room, I'm turning on lights, and I turn on the TV, and I'm walking out of my living room, and the news is on. And I hear from over my shoulder, "We've got this amazing video from Phoenix where a UFO was seen over the city last night." I was like, "What?" And I stopped and I turned around and I'm looking at, the now famous video, of course. And I'm looking and I'm thinking to myself, Lynn, where was I last night? When was this? Oh, I was at the Hard Rock Hotel sitting on the patio, and I'm listening to them talk about this and where it was and where it was sited. And you know where the Hard Rock Hotel is. I had a front row seat. I was on the patio, and I never looked up. And I picked up the phone. I called my friend Billy Siegel, who I was with. I go, "Dude." He goes, "I know, right?" I said, "How did we miss this?" I don't know. And it was like the craziest thing. And I was so disappointed with myself that I was there and this massive sighting was happening the night before. And I did not look up. I was on the patio, I was in conversation, and I missed the entire event. Billy and I still talk about it to this day. We're very, very close friends. That's one twist and my connection to this. The other one I find even more compelling, and that is your moment. You were in the great film Raising Arizona, and you play Nathan Jr.'s mom. And the kidnapping happens, and there's a press conference. And at the press conference, UFOs are referenced in the movie, in the press conference, and you are playing the mom. And that's a crazy synchronistic coincidence thing. And how does that, when you look back at that and what you went through with the Phoenix Lights and your career in the as a doctor, and everything takes a left turn. Well, it had already taken a left turn in Raising Arizona, didn't it?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in coincidence anymore. There's so many serendipities. And once you wake up and you realize that things happen in life that are just amazing, especially with the Phoenix Lights. I have to tell you, if you read the book, there's many, many synchronicities. And, at first I didn't feed into it, but, they kept happening. The puzzle pieces just keep fitting together. But yes, it's really interesting. I'll tell you about the story the night that you saw them in a second, and you saw my video the next night, because that's a good story too. How that came to be, that was a coincidence. But as far as Raising Arizona, I had no idea. When I came forward in 2004 and started doing conferences, someone came up to me after they found out that I had done the movie with Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter and John Goodman and Frances McDormand. I mean, the cast was just incredible. And said, there's a reference to your character, Florence, Arizona, and UFOs. I said, really? Because I hadn't watched it since the late 80s. It came out in 87, which is also a little coincidence, 10 years before the 97 Phoenix Lights mass sighting. In any case, I go to look, and there's a press conference in front of our home, and one of the reporters sticks a microphone in my husband's face after one of the babies was kidnapped. It's a black comedy for anybody that hasn't seen it, by Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter, and says, "There's a rumor your son was abducted by UFOs. Is there any truth to that?" And my husband says, "Oh, please, son, please don't print that. If his mama reads that, she'll lose all hope," which is totally opposite from my own take. But at any rate, it's the only reference in the entire film. And if we had time, I'll tell you what happened with the cinematographer, which was funny in and of itself. But I had no idea. 10 years later, the cinematographer for Raising Arizona in 87 actually went on to do, and he was just getting started like most of the stars in the film. He did Big with Tom Hanks, and When Harry Met Sally, and Howard West was one, and The Addams Family, and he created and directed the Men in Black series.
Yeah, Barry Sonnenfeld. Yeah,
Barry Sonnenfeld in 1997, the same year as the Phoenix Lights. Coincidence?
Yeah, it's not. It's not. It's so strange. And then if we fast forward, talk about synchronicities and things like this happening, then you have actor Kurt Russell come into play.
I'll get to that. So that's a good story.
Well, the reason we'll talk about it later. But what I find interesting about that is he was listening to his son, who was watching TV. He hears the reference. He remembers flying and reporting and seeing and landing his plane in Phoenix, and he was a witness. And it's just like this weird, another synchronicity that if he hadn't have been listening to what his son was watching on TV,
it was Goldie Hawn. It was Goldie Hawn.
Oh, it was Goldie Hawn?
His son was with him.
Oh, his son was with him on the plane. Right, that's what it was.
On the plane when he was coming into Sky Harbor. And another little synchronicity, coincidence or connection, is while he was reporting it, I was filming it. There you go.
Yeah, right. It's probably when we look at the big cases from history, I would say it's kind of like a 3 or 4 way tie about investigation, in depth. Every Phoenix Lights is right there with Roswell or Travis Walton or Rendlesham, Betty and Barney Hill. The Phoenix Lights, it is so researched, and what we have, the gift of the Phoenix Lights, is it's modern. This isn't from 1947. This is modern history happening over a major metropolitan area.
Actually, the Phoenix Lights has become known worldwide as the most witnessed, most documented, most important mass anomalous aerial sighting in modern history, if not all of history. And,
Right.
like I said, I mean, earlier, I mean, once I had a 750-page journal of such incredible data, and as the story unfolded, which I hope we can get to today, that's fascinating in and of itself. It's time we get this topic out in the open, address it, accept it, and study it, so we can find out not only who's driving these things, but also move forward in our own evolution. Don't you think, Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And if we go chronologically, if we back up, because the original reports of the object were not in Phoenix. They started in and around the Las Vegas area, right? Or was there something before that?
We have learned so much in the last 27 years, and unless you've heard me speak or read the book, even seasoned ufologists get it wrong. They've gone with what's been in the media, that there's one or two events, and the first event was the real thing, and the second event was flares. Put that aside, please. I'm here to tell you. There is so much mis and disinformation out there, and that was the other reason I came forward, to set the record straight. It wasn't just one or two events. It was many, many events, starting at 3 p.m. in the afternoon in Arizona. There were daylight sightings. 5 o'clock hour, there were Native Americans that were reporting it from New Mexico. 7 o'clock hour and beyond in California. The 10, 11 o'clock hour, there were two commercial airline pilots. I have the whole story in the book. It's fascinating. Took one of the pilots years before she got in touch with me. She was so scared to tell anyone, but she told me in confidence, and she said I could share it. That as her plane from Phoenix to California was approaching Las Vegas, one of the craft, and we'll get into that in a second, covered Las Vegas. And she called into radar to ask them if they were pinging anything. And suddenly another commercial airline pilot called and said, "What the hell is in front of me?" And then another very authoritative voice came on the radio and started asking them questions, details, and she got freaked. And she said, "You know what? I don't know if we saw what we saw. It's gone now. I must have made a mistake." And she continues on her way to California. About a half hour later, they're 30,000 feet altitude, 140 passengers and the pilots and etc. Suddenly notice a flare about a half a mile away. This is 30,000 feet, okay? And seconds later, a jet comes whizzing by with afterburners, and she said she almost jumped out of her chair. She was so taken with it. It was so close. And she called her husband and said, "Don't answer the phone or the door." She got very nervous. That's just one story. And as the sightings continued, and yes, between 8 and 10, is when thousands of people were outside looking purposely for a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was very clear in the northwest sky, beautiful March evening, when they also got a glimpse of one, and we just heard a couple years ago from Peter Davenport, the director of the National UFO Reporting Center in Seattle, that from his data, and he's received hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures and reports, from his data, one of these objects was 8 miles wide. Now, we're not just talking about these orbs, the lights, okay, which is really important, which some people saw it detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and dock with it later. Other people at rooftop level, I mean, we're talking gliding right over their heads. That's the other thing. If you can go on the GAP page, GAP, Geospatial Animation Project, on the Phoenix Lights Network website, 12-year study, meticulous study. 2 or more people had to see the same craft to be in the study, and they look very different. Now, whether it was one craft that could morph and be triangle, V-shape, boomerang shape, or the perspective from where the person was standing, or a parade. And ultimately, because the sightings continued, yes, the 8 to 10 time period is when most of the reports came in, because that's when most people were outside looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet. And when they saw these things coming towards them or on top of them, and this is rooftop level, people were looking into these, what they called wells or canisters. We have a pilot that was right underneath this massive craft. There is so much data to this. At any rate, first of all, it wasn't just one craft. It was 10 different crafts again. Now, the sighting itself also with the craft, the technology itself, some people saw these crafts split in two and shoot straight up. Other people saw it take off at blink speed without even dispersing the air. It was totally, totally silent. Maybe I mean, you talk to a lot of people. We have not seen this kind of technology in 27 years. Where is it? Okay. And the way that it affected people in real time and long term, we'll talk about that. In fact, we're doing a scientific study. If anybody goes to the Phoenix Lights Network website, on the landing page, there's a triangle, and right underneath you can enter this website. Loaded. It's packed with information for people to consider and just explore. But underneath that, because it affected people at such a deep level, and we can get into that a little bit later because half my book is about that. I felt that it was imperative as a scientist to actually do a scientific study. And anyone that saw the Phoenix Lights on March 13th, 1997, please join us. We have over 1,000 people worldwide that are seeing similar phenomena. But we really would appreciate if anybody out there has seen it on March 13th or similar phenomena worldwide to join us in our effort to really quantify the true data. And the findings are mind-boggling. We can get to that a little later. Do you want me to start when my first sighting began in 95?
Let's no, we're going to stay right where we are. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that the eyewitnesses from Tucson to Phoenix and heading west had all who didn't know each other, hadn't heard it, had described a craft that was that had shape. It was a V shape. It was ginormous, but it was blocking out the stars, but it was also translucent at the same time. And to hear these witnesses from Phoenix is a big area. And most people, Lynn, and you get this, they think Phoenix is just a city and it's like this. It's not. It's Tempe, it's Glendale, it's Phoenix, it's a large Chandler, Gilbert, right. It's a large metropolitan area that is spread out. It is huge, and so you had people from all over different locations around Phoenix that were seeing the same thing, and how interesting is it that the craft apparently, and the lights were huge. They weren't light; they were huge. And the craft has been described, you just mentioned up to 8 miles. Most people were describing something that was over a mile wide, moving silently over the city. And I think that is very, very, very significant. Independent eyewitness testimony by the thousands.
Absolutely. But there's a lot more to the story because if you go back to 95, and that's where the real data comes in. And I don't know if we've ever really discussed this, but in 95, my husband and I had a very close sighting to our home of 3 amber orbs in a pyramid formation, literally and figuratively right outside our bedroom window. If you go on the Phoenix Lights Network website photo page, you'll see the topography. We're pretty high in the mountains. In Paradise Valley, and we overlook the entire valley and the city and the airport and the 2 mountains in the distance, South Mountain and the Estrella Mountains a few miles back. And we're so used to seeing planes and helicopters and streetlights and car lights. These were very, very different. I always go back to this close sighting, Jimmy, because I saw it up close and personal. These were orbs, and what's amazing is that it happened, another little coincidence, the eve of my birthday, February 6th. I was taking a leisurely bath, and my husband was standing. One wall of our bedroom was a window. So if anything pops up out there, we get to see it if we're in the bedroom. And he happened to be standing at the window on the phone with my mother-in-law back east. We're born and raised in Philadelphia, calling to wish me a happy birthday. And he was on several hospital and state boards, medical boards. Nothing ever ruffled his feathers. And suddenly he sounded alarmed. He says, "Oh my God, what the hell is that? Get over here quick." And I grabbed my towel, wringing wet, out of the bed, run to the window. And as we're watching, a little below us, now mind you, we are nestled in a mountain range. We are gated. There is no way that this was military. And it was a little below us, over someone else's property, were 3 amber orbs in a pyramid formation, one on top and 2 very closely aligned underneath. And immediately, coming from a video background, I thought, whoa, I've got to get my video camera, but it was downstairs. And I always suggest people do this when it's an important moment or whatever. I try to take everything in mentally. I don't know if you've ever done that, Jimmy. You probably have. But from, we're talking the size, the shape, the color. They were about 3 to 6 feet each, depending on how close they were. They were oval shape, which is interesting now that the Nimitz Navy pilots came forward and said the Tic Tac and the oval shape UFOs, I don't know if they're connected, but they were oval shape. And I called them an orb. This is why I go back, so people understand that these lights were orbs. The light did not extend outside the edge. It was self-contained, and it was a uniform amber color throughout. Very soothing, very mesmerizing. And I thought, if I don't get a picture of this, nobody's going to believe it. It was so extraordinary. And I go running to the closet to grab my 35 millimeter, a cheap 35 millimeter camera that I kept handy for our beautiful sunsets, which I collect. And as I'm doing so, my husband calls me back. He says, "Get over here quick. One of them is disappearing." As we both stood there, and again, this is like it happened yesterday, the top orb, without budging from the 2 underneath, started to shrink very, very slowly, mechanically, as if there was an intelligence behind it. It's really it's hard to describe in logical terms, like a dimmer switch. At the time, I didn't know the word cloaking other than my kids. We had 2 boys that were growing up on the original Star Trek. And that was my first thought, the Romulan cloaking device that wavered before it cloaked. Well, these didn't. I noticed that immediately. But it felt like they were cloaking, because after this just got smaller and smaller and smaller to pea size and disappeared, it felt like it was still there. Where did it go? I jumped out on the balcony, and if anybody's on the photo page, you can see I took a picture of the 2 lower orbs and immediately noticed an eerie silence, as if time had stopped. It was just bizarre. And as intently as I was watching these 2 lower orbs, and it took me over 2 years after the mass sighting to admit this to one of the investigators, it felt like something was watching me. It just did. And going through my mind, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you. And the next thing I remember, the left bottom orb started to shrink mechanically, just like the top one did. And something told me to take a picture, and I quickly shot a picture of that. That was the only one that turned out at the time. But for me, it was confirmatory that, whoa, I caught this thing. You could see they're up close. And I didn't even know who to show it to. I knew nothing about this phenomenon at all. And I wondered for 2 years what this advanced technology that it seemed to be was right outside our bedroom window until.
Can I ask you, let me stop you right there for a second. I want to ask you about your husband, if I may. We've never talked about him, but at that moment, where was his mind in all of this? Did he have an interest in UFOs or the supernatural or the paranormal, or is this completely fresh?
Neither of us did. And he was inside and I was outside. Interestingly, he never wanted to talk about it. Everyone comes from a different background, different belief system, different worldview. He would get a little agitated. Now, this is interesting. I'm going to share a little backstory, inside story here. I was outside. He was inside. Okay. It wasn't until a year after the mass sighting that, Linda Moulton Howell, who I'm sure everybody out there probably knows, I had met with very few people. I wanted an answer to what I had gotten on 35 millimeter and video. And I met with Linda Moulton Howell. She suggested that I get in touch with Navy optical physicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee. And this was like, 2 years before. But a year after the mass sighting, we had another sighting. And if anybody watches our movie, it's free on Hulu and it's on Amazon Prime. It's a real grassroots effort, but it's one over a dozen international
It's a
awards.
great, it's a,
You
it's a
saw
great,
part of it.
I've
Yes.
I've seen it so many times. It is excellent. Anyway, continue.
Thank you. Thank you. At any rate, you know, I mean, she said to me to get in touch with Navy optical physicists. She was fascinated with my pictures. And yet I waited till a year after the mass sighting. In the documentary, we show a sighting that happened that was mind-boggling. A year after, through the fog, straight lines and mirror images. And the final thing is a giant triangle. I mean, this is, and I called around and the military was flabbergasted that, they weren't flying in the fog, but that's another story for another day. But at any rate, at that point, actually a couple days before, it was fog. I mean, you could not see outside our window, nothing, and had not seen the Phoenix lights. I'm sorry, I'm getting off kilter, but since you asked, we had not seen the Phoenix lights since '97, and this was January of '98. And my husband and I were out on the balcony, and behind his head, I saw two muted amber lights, and I thought, "Ooh, could that be them again?" And I had met with the University of Arizona, the top of the head of the optical sciences department, and showed him my data as well. I really went to great lengths for sensitive photography and on and on. And he was fascinated. He got a whole group together, and he said, if you ever see them again, you need to get better equipment. I had this cheap little Canon instamatic camera. So I called him up the next morning and I said, I'm not sure if they're back, but if they are, what should I get? And he instructed me, and I go out and I get this, top of the line Pentax with a telelens and star filter. The next night they did come back, and I happened to have a meeting the next morning at Village Labs, which was the investigative hubbub at the time. And I told them, I said, look, I don't know if they're them. I don't know if they're going to come back the next, third night, but I have a feeling, please alert the other videographers. There were four of us, and another little coincidence, north, south, east, and west. Okay, we lived north, south, east, and west, at which he did. Okay, they did. And that night, it was spectacular. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was straight lines and mirror images, and the final thing was an upside down triangle of three lights. And at that point, we had video from four different people of the same event, which could not be done, by the way, on March 13th, because as we found out, and again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but as we found out, because I actually hired a geology professor to triangulate the different videos, and it doesn't do the videos do not do the unknowns justice. They're much smaller and white and flicker. Nonetheless, the formations are very compelling. And he had gone to the Kristen with the boomerang first, then who shot it after 10 o'clock. The two boomerangs are after 10 o'clock, shot after 10 o'clock, which is really important. My video, which was the endpoints of a V or triangle, which was over Class V restricted airspace, we'll get to that. And another video that was actually called up to MUFON to be on the balcony that night, because another fellow was also seeing them like I was, Steve Blonder, and they caught an arrowhead. Okay, so now there were four videos, and I tried to have them triangulated. And when he found out that they were different formations, okay, as well as different times, he got actually peeved and he walked out because you can't triangulate them. But here we had four different people at the same time of the same sighting. And so I called Dr. Bruce Maccabee and asked him if he would take a look at their videos as an afterthought. And by then we had gone through the strips of celluloid for 35 millimeter. And I found a couple more pictures, and I sent him the first and the last picture. And he calls me a couple weeks later from that 95 sighting. And he said, you said that sighting was only a couple minutes. I said, right. He said, are you sure? I said, that's what I remember. He said, ask your husband. I said, he won't talk about it. I said, well, you've got to corroborate with him. So I sat him down. I said, look, we don't have to talk about the sighting, but do you remember, and remind you, it's 3 years later, how long that sighting was in 95? He said, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes tops. Okay, I go back to Dr. Maccabee. He said, that's impossible. I said, what do you mean? He says, first of all, and he was the first to notice, and here, that's why I wanted to bring this up. Because if you look at those pictures, again, they're in the negative of 95. While my husband and I were focused on the close orbs in the distance, as it turns out, in the same location as I would also capture them 2 months before, head on, turning into a V shape, and air traffic controllers would confirm the next morning they were over Class B restricted airspace. And during the mass sighting, they're there in 95, the same exact phenomena, disappearing while our close orbs were disappearing. Also, the unknowns moved. Okay. But he said, that's not the most significant thing. I said, what do you mean? He said, look at the skyline. I said, okay. And if, again, the data speaks for itself, just look at it. There's many lights on, groups of lights, which he was very impressed with, groups of lights that were on in the first picture that were off in the last picture. He said, that doesn't happen in a couple of minutes. He says, I want you to do an experiment. He was very meticulous about this. He says, go out on the balcony, approximately where you were standing in 95, and shoot the skyline. Mind you, it's 3 years later. And he said, and then we're going to see, do it one night every hour, one night every half hour. Actually did another night every 15 minutes to see when these groups of lights would go out. And as it turned out, I usually take a bath between 7 and 8 when we're home. So let's be conservative and start at 8 o'clock. The groups of lights started going out at 9 o'clock. The last picture is indicative of 10:30, 11 o'clock, and he did it again for a National Geographic show program, and he had better software by then. And there were more groups of lights that were on in the first picture than off in the last picture. And he says, can I present this case in the upcoming 1999 MUFON International Symposium in Washington, D.C.? I said, Dr. McAfee, this is your baby. I would have never noticed this data. Just keep my name out of it. I really wanted, I didn't know what I was going to do with what I had. I did not want to come forward. There was a lot of ridicule and stickering and discrediting, and I was doing my homework. He was very kind, did not mention my name, but he presented it as the first, and as far as we know, the only authenticated photographic evidence of missing time, that there were hours in between those two pictures, not minutes, as we remember.
Were you abducted?
The report is on the website. Say,
were you abducted like Nathan Jr.? I'm just saying. I know, right?
Jimmy, I don't know, but something. Okay, because I have to tell you, there hasn't been not one report of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. Can't speak for other things, but I can about the Phoenix Lights. If anything, people were in awe and in wonder. And I still have people telling me that they feel blessed to have had the experience. And it touched people at a very deep level, and it touched me, obviously, at a very deep level, because I changed my whole life's journey for the Phoenix Lights. So that was in 95. And then, after not seeing anything for 2 years, I noticed 3 amber orbs in a line formation, equidistant from each other, far distant in the northwest sky. And I thought, well, wait a minute. They were huge balls of amber light. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're amber. They're in a formation, an equidistant line formation. They're hovering for minutes, strangely similar to 95. And I mentioned it to my husband, and he says, do I still have to go to work tomorrow? That was his comment. Okay. And I watched them each actually implode. It seemed like they shrunk from right to left. The next night, and this is January 23rd, he was at a medical board meeting. And I come upstairs, and as I said, if you come into our bedroom and anything's out there, whether it's a haboob, one of these dust storms or a fire out there or whatever, it catches our eye, and so did these lights. Okay, suddenly I see 3 lights. The same 3 lights are now in front of South Mountain, and I knew they were in front of South Mountain because there were red blinking lights on top of South Mountain that alert the planes coming into Sky Harbor International Airport that there's a mountain there, and these were lower than them. And I thought, okay, enough. I'm getting my video camera. So I run downstairs, grab my video camera, get outside. I got about 18 seconds worth. The battery goes dead, and it was charged. Okay, so I go outside. They're gone. About a half hour later, my husband comes up to drive, and I go outside, and I said, honey, remember last night when I told you that I saw the 3 amber lights in a row, equidistant from each other, far west? About a half an hour ago, about 8 o'clock. This is 8:30 now. They were right in front of South Mountain. As I'm pointing like this, they reappear in the same spot. It was like, whoa, holy moly. And I run upstairs. I grab thank goodness. Okay. I grabbed my 35 millimeter because my video camera was being charged. And again, in 35 millimeter, you can't fudge it. It's in the negative. As I'm ready to shoot the 3, suddenly 6 across pop on. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, just pop on above the 3. It was so unnerving. Not having an explanation for 95, I started to shake. And the first picture, if you look at that picture on the Phoenix Lights Network photo page, is wavy because I was shaking. But thank goodness I kept my wits about me and I kept clicking away. The second picture, to me, is a smoking gun. It looks like a V, a light here and 2 lights on either side with 2 underneath. 2 months later, during the mass sighting, thousands of people would describe what they were seeing as 5 lights in a V formation with 2 trailing lights. This is 2 months before. And as I'm shooting, it seemed that what I was catching head on was turning into a V shape. At any rate, make a very long story short, the next morning, first I called the Republic and I told them, the Arizona Republic, and I said, you got to get somebody out there quick. There's strange lights in front of South Mountain. I have somebody take a picture and tell me what it is. By the time I got finished my sentence, they were gone. The first thing I did when I woke up the next morning, I thought, you know what? There has to be a logical explanation. I've really tried. I'm a healthy skeptic. One must be open as a physician for anything walking through the doors. But I figured there must be a logical explanation. I called the Arizona Republic and I said, anybody call last night to report strange lights in front of South Mountain? She got off. She got right back on. She said, no, nobody called. Well, I know I called. So I said, well, my husband and I saw some strange lights. I'm sure there's a logical explanation. Do you have any idea who I might be able to call? She says, well, sometimes Luke Air Force Base does experimental maneuvers and they don't tell the public about it. That sounded reasonable. So now I call I call the Air Force Base. Tried to be very professional. My husband and I are both physicians. We live mountainside in Paradise Valley. We saw some strange lights in front of South Mountain last night. Do you have any idea what they might have been? And from the get-go, Jimmy, she had an attitude. And she said, well, they didn't come in from here and they didn't come out from here, so we had nothing to do with them. I said, be that as it may, we did see something. I just tried to find out what it is. She said, well, you said it was near the airport, so maybe they saw something there. Now it was a mission, which was very unlikely, by the way. And I called the FAA and said the same thing. And she was really nice. She said, you know what? Maybe the air traffic controller saw something last night. Let me ask. I said, great. She keeps me hanging. She gets back on. She says, you know what? There was a group of air traffic controllers here last night that did see something strange, and a couple of them are here this morning. I said, oh, please, can I speak to at least one of them? Took forever. Now, I met him afterwards. In our book, we have a briefing at Village Labs with him and another person that also saw it in January and March 13th. And he was really low-key guy. He was more excited than me. He said, did you see 6 lights that were equal distance from each other hovering enough range last night at 8:30? He said, yes. He said, there were 3 at 8 o'clock. I said, I saw them too. He was thrilled that I had seen them in a distance. He said, they popped up at 8 o'clock. Over Class B restricted airspace, there's a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport. Anything that comes into that airspace must call into the tower, and no one did. They looked on radar, did not show up on radar, and they got nervous and they disappeared. When 6 popped up at 8:30, they really got nervous. They looked on radar, did not show up on radar, got the high-powered binoculars to look. And in his own words, there were 6 points of light totally equidistant from each other. And this is getting back to what people saw March 13th as well, that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't quite see what these lights were attached to or had a force field holding them in rock solid formation. And one of them was a meteorologist. In fact, he taught climatology at one of the colleges here. He said the entire thing, over a mile wide, turned as a unit against the wind, very telling, elevated slowly and moved in synchrony, as he put it, behind South Mountain. So I said, so what was it? And there was silence. And then he said, beats me. I said, you're an air traffic controller. You're supposed to know it's in our airspace. He told me that the entire group ruled out every conventional aircraft, balloons, Chinese lanterns, flares, even skydivers with lights, everything they could think of. We kept in contact. I continued to photograph these phenomena as other people were as well. And my husband was getting a little annoyed with me. You asked me about my husband. Every time, and I guess the scientist in me, every time I saw these lights appear, and they appeared quite often up until March 13th, I felt compelled to document them on film. So, whatever, I would say, hold on, I would run outside. So he was getting a little annoyed. So here's how close I was. I figured, you know what, I've got to show this to somebody and find out what's going on. A friend of a friend had a neighbor who had a friend who knew the past president of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, which I had never heard of before. So I call him up. I tell him that I'm seeing these lights. He hadn't heard about it, but again, there were other people that were seeing them too. And I said, I have a picture from 95, a very close sighting that I would like somebody of credence to take a look at. He refers me to a field investigator for the following the following Wednesday, who calls me on Tuesday to say the then state director, Tom Taylor of MUFON, wanted to be there, but his mom had just passed on Saturday. The funeral was Wednesday, could we postpone? The only window I had for 2-3 weeks was on Friday morning. He said, fine, 10 o'clock, great. I knock on his door. He opens the door. The first thing he says to me, did you see the mass sighting last night? And I said, well, I saw something similar to what I shared with you that I saw 2 months ago. In fact, I called the air traffic controllers this morning because it looked like the same exact phenomenon, the same exact location. They confirmed that it was over Class B restricted airspace. In fact, they said that 2 pilots called in. A commercial pilot that was just taking off on the tarmac said, what the hell are these lights over me? And a private pilot called in, didn't say who that private pilot was, but I actually got video of it last night. He said, great, because NBC was coming to interview him in a half an hour. I said, whoa. I said, first of all, not about me. Okay. And I did health reporting in the early 80s. Actually, I started in Philadelphia in 76 and also did health reporting for NBC and USA Cable here in Phoenix in the early 80s. I said, I don't know what we're dealing with. I don't know if it's a hoax or military or whatever. But again, it's not about me. It's about the data. Take a copy of the video, share it with whoever. I'm out of here. And I left.
Were you thinking alien, Lynn? Were you thinking alien at the time? Were you going in that direction?
I was just curious what it was.
No, but I mean, but were you considering that as a possibility?
The up close and personal in 95, and that's why I wanted to share that, really set off something inside me that was like, whoa. I mean, there was intelligence behind these things. These were like nothing I ever thought existed here on Earth. And then seeing them at a distance, and at the time I didn't know that they were also in the 95 pictures, but seeing them at a distance and then having the air traffic controllers tell me that they didn't know what it was and that it was, something that was anomalous to them. That's all I knew, that it was anomalous. I didn't think that it was ETs or anything. I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. Like I said, I didn't know if it was a hoax or military or whatever. But I came home and at 4, I was sitting in front of my television with the VCR. I didn't even know if they were going to cover it, to be honest. And this is probably what you saw, because it's starting at 4 o'clock. This guy had shared my video with everyone, and across the screen was breaking news with my video. It was pretty exciting, I must say, just to have people see what I had been seeing for 2 years and documented on film. Again, I had no idea what it was. And by 9 o'clock, there were a couple other videos, an arrowhead of 5 lights, and also these boomerang, which was like, oh my goodness, what is going on here? The following Tuesday, because I didn't know what to do at that point, I see on the news, because it was big news here for a while, with my video up there every time. There is a fella who is out in Tempe near ASU, Arizona State University, Jim Delatoso, who's showing, because besides his color lab, computer lab, he also collected and actually was one of the only in the world, and I'm sure you'll discuss it with Britt Elder this Thursday, because I met her there too. He was actually analyzing video and pictures almost identical from all over the world. I had no idea. I had no idea at that point that this was happening worldwide, from Belgium and UK and Russia. In fact, Russia had a mass sighting 2 months before we did, in February 19th, 97. And one of the craft that a civilian took video of is actually one of the craft that's in our GAP. I didn't know until I saw it in the GAP study, which has 3 lights. Each light was actually 3 lights. At any rate, at that point, I had no idea what was going on. And it was mind-boggling to me that other people saw what we were seeing. And at that point, I pushed my entire medical career aside. And every day, because I knew nothing about this, I would read, I would go on the internet, which was just getting started, and I would keep a journal every single day of everything, media reports, of military. As the story unfolded, which is really interesting. Can I get into that?
Well, we're going to hit a break here in a second. So we'll pick up when we come back. I did want to ask you this before we get to the break. I've got about 60 seconds. How long after the March 13th did Fife Symington have his famous how many days later was that?
And that's really important. Let's talk about that after the break, because that's important, how the story unfolded.
Well, but how many days later?
That wasn't until June. Okay, real quick. There was no investigation. There was no explanation for months. Suddenly, and I have a FOIA, by the way, that I can talk to you about after we get back. But at a May meeting, because she got over 1,000 calls, Councilwoman Frances Barwood, at a council meeting, innocently, she didn't say it, she was doing her job, asked for an investigation. She was plastered by the media. It was really scary to come forward. And that put a lid on it until June 18th. Front page USA Today article. For the first time, people outside of Arizona were hearing about the Phoenix Lights mass sighting. And we didn't have social media at the time. It went viral overnight. The next morning was on every national morning show, on Peter Jennings, Dan Rather. It wasn't until then, the next morning, late morning, we get a public announcement that for the first time that the former governor Fife Symington was holding an unscheduled press conference that afternoon to reveal the culprit of the lights over Phoenix. This is
horrible. And we'll talk about that after the break. I'll say this. Frances turned out to be the hero that she is. She talk about just doing her job, right? That's it. She was just doing her job where others were trying to brush this aside. Looking at the original videos of the city council meetings and her bringing all of that up, I'm just thinking to myself, she's just doing the right thing. And then in the end, and she continued for years. I mean, I hold her up on the highest of pedestals. And in this whole case, it was Frances that, in her position as a city council, well, do we say council person? How do we say it to be PC correct?
She was actually vice mayor of Phoenix as well. And there's another story when we get back 3 years later, which is really, really poignant and important. But yes, at the time, she was a councilwoman and a vice mayor of Phoenix.
Yeah.
And nobody would talk to her. Nobody would talk to her. I mean, there was silence at the meeting. Nobody said a word. They went on. They just went on. They just ignored her.
Incredible. Let's take our break right here. This is Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Dr. Lynne Kitei. We're talking about the Phoenix Lights and all of the latest research. We'll be right back after this short break. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. This is Jimmy Church. Please visit and explore Egypt this October 3rd through the 14th, 2024 with Billy, Elizabeth, myself, and very special guest and the #1 podcaster in the world, Sean Kelly. It's simple to do. Just go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on upcoming tours, or click on the link below. We'll see you there. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. And right now, if you get a Game Changer membership for a limited time, you will get Fade to Black Blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. That's right. We have 2 t-shirts. We have the original, the classic Fade to Black t-shirt. You know you want one. Post a picture. Send it to us. We'll put it in our Fade to Black gallery. And we've got the new official Fade to Black t-shirt drawn by Michael Oming. 2 t-shirts, 2 ways to get them. Get yours today. Everything is in stock. Everything gets autographed. Everything includes shipping. And you're going to get a tracking number. And with the Game Changer membership, you get an email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads of the show. Those are uploaded every single night after the show to the website. So don't delay. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Backley Tappy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. Fade to Black blend. Get yourself a Game Changer membership. That's right. Fade to Black blend coffee with your Game Changer membership. So good. My picture's on it. It's right there. Fade to Black blend. Best coffee in the world. Our guest tonight, Dr. Lynne Kitei. We are talking about the Phoenix Lights. There's a lot of new research. And right before the break, we were talking about councilperson Frances Barwood and her unrelenting efforts to get into this, because she's getting phone calls, she's getting contacted, she's got to get answers. What went on March 13th? And now we brought up Fife Symington, and I want to address him directly if we can, Lynn, because what happened later with Fife, and I'll let you tell the story, that's one thing. But he came out and announced this surprise press conference, and it was, I mean, if I would have done that and had to make excuses and everything else for it after the fact, he thought it was funny. The people of Phoenix did not. And it was one of the most embarrassing moments for somebody in political office, number one. And number two, people wanted answers, including Frances Barwood.
Absolutely. Well, first, I want to say you mentioned your shirt. I don't know if anybody noticed. One of my favorite keepsakes, and my husband too. He loves that. I'm sure you got to get one. It's terrific. But yes, I have to tell you that I had no idea, actually, because if you look at most of the shows that show it, they have people laughing when he says that people were panicking. No. Like I said, there wasn't one report, not one in 27 years, over 77 years, of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. If anything, it was miraculous for people. I'm sure the military and the government at that point were panicking, because here it came out, USA Today. I mean, we were deluged by media from all over the world the next day. And once they talked to the witnesses, their stories were so heartfelt and so detailed that they too were asking, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation? And then suddenly he pulls this off. In fact, if you look at the picture of or the video, you'll see a guy in the back. He was a detective or whatever. He was part of the crew there with sunglasses on. He came up to me at one of our annual Scottsdale Harkenshay Theater anniversary celebrations, and he whispered in my ear and he said, "Do you remember the guy behind Symington with the glasses?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "That was me." He said, "When they brought out his aide with the giant alien head costume," he said, "I have never been so mortified in my entire life." Not only that, but at the Contact in the Desert, I was doing a workshop and the electricity went off. So I couldn't share my PowerPoint, but I was discussing it like I am today. And a lady raises her hand. She says, "I was there." She was there at that press conference. I said, "Really? What happened?" She said, "What people don't know is that after people laughed when he said, you're taking it too seriously," he said, "Turn off the cameras." people were really pissed off. He said there were parents there that were children that saw something that was 3, 4 moles wide, and he's making a joke out of it. People don't know that. I didn't know that until she told me that people were really pissed off. And myself, I thought, okay, what's going on here? I'm calling every military base. Okay, I really tried to do my homework and find out what they knew. Okay, never told them details. And I tried to get as high up as I could. And I have conversations in my book that are quite comical. One, I mean, I'm talking higher up, said to me, the only one that knows who did this is God and whoever did this. Kind of it. And then a month later, on July 24th, I get a phone call from one of the PR heads at the Air National Guard. And she says, "Oh, Dr. Lynn, I think we know what those lights were back in March." And I was thrilled. Again, I was looking for any logical explanation. She said, "Do you believe in all these months, no one ever looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard? And the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off military illumination flares in Operation Snowbird," which I later found out means diversionary tactical maneuvers, which they may have been sending off flares, but we have one person, not one, that describes what flares do. She said, "That must be what some people saw." I said, well, wait a minute. I said, when was the Maryland Air National Guard in town? She said, March 1st to the 15th. I said, were they in town in January? She says, oh, no. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely not. I said, well, my husband and I saw the same exact phenomena in the same exact location 2 months before the mass sighting. In fact, I called the morning after and found air traffic controllers who saw the same thing in the same location, January and March 13th, and over Class B restricted airspace. And she says, you never told me that, because I never told details. And I said, besides, and by then I had educated myself to anything logical, including military flares. I said, and you're trying to tell me that military illumination flares that are dropped from aircraft on a parachute, that drift and drop with the wind haphazardly, have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself. Again, not one person yet that I have heard from has seen that phenomenon traverse the entire state in a rock-solid, equidistantly spaced, mile-wide V for hours. And she says to me, I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you. Well, I'm still waiting for that.
Of course she did. Of course, yeah. Of course she did. Of course she did. Back to Fife for just a second. Whether it was guilt or his son or whatever it was, he later came out and said that he was a witness to it with his son, and they watched it. Yeah, and it's one of the there's so many facets to the Phoenix Lights, but just that in of itself isn't for him to come forward and say, hey, okay, I got to come clean here. Huge.
For whatever reason, he bravely came forward, and he was an awarded military pilot. And he admitted right after the 10th anniversary, but I want to get back to the 3rd anniversary because something happened very significant that people don't know about. But right after the 10th anniversary, suddenly he comes out with he talks about that he saw one of these mile-wide craft. And not only wasn't it flares, okay, but he used a word that most other countries that are much more open to these phenomena, I found, have been using for decades. He used the word otherworldly. So you asked me what I thought it was. And that is a word that I could use too. It was otherworldly. Okay. And then right after the Pentagon, in the paper, New York Times, Harry Reid study came out, the $22 million study. That's when the private pilot that I had been told had called in on close approach to the airport during the mass sighting came forward, and that was none other than beloved actor Kurt Russell, who was also a private pilot. He was coming into Sky Harbor with his son. They had a place here in Carefree, and on close approach, very close approach, I think they were like a half a mile out, and his son saw this V of 6 lights. I saw that too. By the time I got outside and got my camera up, there were three endpoints. But he was reporting it while I was filming it, which is really, really cool. But I wanted to go back a little bit, if I may. Okay. Do you have a question about that or comment?
No. Continue.
Okay. First of all, which we didn't know, and this is really important because now that we talked about the flares and all, the third anniversary. Well, first of all, on the 24th, right after I got off the phone with the gal from the Air National Guard, it was my sister-in-law's birthday on July 24th, another little coincidence. And I called her up to wish her a happy birthday in Delaware. The first thing she says to me is, "Oh, I just saw on TV that the lights that you saw back in March were flares." They heard about it days before we did the next morning. Front page, okay? Okay, that's one little thing. Okay. Then 3 years later, God bless her, Frances Barwood was running for Secretary of State to get answers for the lights over Phoenix. And she was asking brilliantly for a reenactment. Hey, if it was military, again, I'm a healthy skeptic, I'm open, show me. Shame
Do
on
it.
you for going right over people's heads and then denying it, right? But show me. And if you go to the news page, okay, because we got an announcement right before the third anniversary, I think it was March 7th, that on March 8th, 3 Air National Guards, I believe it was New York, Michigan, and California, were showing everyone the Phoenix lights. They must have been practicing for weeks. At any rate, we were ready for them. And if you go to the news page at the Phoenix Lights Network website and scroll down a bit to like the middle of the page, and there's a block that says AZ Family, you'll see exactly what they did. They tried to make a triangle. It was upside down. It fell apart immediately. One of the flares just fizzled out. It had huge smoke trails, just what flares do. If anything, put a nail in the coffin. And people don't know this happened. They tried to reenact it. To date, the Phoenix lights have never been recreated or explained, but they continue to appear worldwide. And another very poignant point, which I didn't know until a few years later, a very young teenager, 16 years old at the time, John Greenwald, you just had him last week, he is fabulous, had started the Black Vault. And his main purpose was to send out FOIA requests. And he did for the Phoenix Lights. Very interesting after you've learned what I just told you. Don't read the whole thing. But what's most poignant, on the night, then this is from Luke Air Force Base. Okay, on the night of March 13th, 97. Oh, wait a minute, before I do this. The lights continued. I never got to finish. The lights continued at 3 a.m. in the afternoon. I'm sorry, at 3 a.m. in the evening, 3 a.m. There was a call, a very credible call, and we had part of that in the documentary, to Peter Davenport of the National UFO Reporting Center from an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base, reporting in great detail, very detailed, very credible, that jets were sent off from Luke Air Force Base at 8:30 that evening to intercept and get gun camera film, which I heard that they did. I've never seen it, but I heard that they did, of one of these mile-wide craft hovering right over Central Phoenix at 7th Avenue and Indian School. And we have civilians that saw them taking off with afterburners. As they got close, the lights dimmed. And as they got closer, the lights dimmed out and the entire craft disappeared. And supposedly this alleged crewman helped one of the pilots out of his craft because he was so shaken up by it. Okay. And that Luke went on lockdown after that. And I even have, if you go to the share page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, just a few years ago, and now we're talking 27 years later, the gal that was the weather gal at Luke Air Force Base contacted me. And she said she got dozens and dozens of calls, and they denied they got any, but they got dozens and dozens. She got dozens and dozens. Was so curious, she went outside and actually saw the mass sighting herself. There's so much to the story. So the sighting continued all the way to 5:30 the next morning. I was on the plane going to California finishing the second edition of my book. It's in its fourth edition now. I just keep adding. The original book is there. I squeezed a 750-page journal into 230 pages, ultimately, 7 years later. And just as a scientist, as a physician, as an experiencer, as an educator, I just couldn't stick it in a drawer. And finally came out in 2004. It's in its fourth print because I just keep adding chapters as the story unfolds. But in the meantime, I'm sitting there finishing up proofreading the second edition, and this family is around me. It's in front of me, and next to me is an older gentleman with a grandfather with his kid. They were going to Disneyland. And I was on my way to Dateline NBC. They were doing the top 10 UFO sightings, and the Phoenix Lights was number one, by the way. But at any rate, he looks over and he says, "Oh, I saw them." I said, "You saw the Phoenix Lights?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "I'm the head of the crew, the Boeing crew. We were coming into work at 5:30 the next morning, and one of these over mile wide craft was right over their tarmac." So we're talking from 3 p.m. in the afternoon, seen in Arizona, the 5 o'clock hour in New Mexico, 7 o'clock hour and beyond in California, 11 o'clock hour in Nevada, and continuing all the way the next week. So we're talking at least 4 states. And now that we've done our study, we're finding there were people that also saw it on March 13th in Texas, in Utah, and Colorado. It's mind-boggling. The final result and conclusion of the GAP, the Geospatial Animation Project, was that it wasn't just 1 or 2 events, it was many events over at least a dozen hours. And we're talking about a parade. We're talking about a parade. Whoever did this wanted to be seen and wanted to wake people up. And that's the other side of this. Before I get to how it affected people in real time and long term, I just wanted to read you this because, if I may, okay, the FOIA, because this is very telling. Okay, here we know that they tried to reenact the sighting, the Phoenix Lights 3 years later. They said that they were military flares, okay? And here, there's a FOIA that was received in May. This is before Barwood went to the council meeting in May. This was May 1st, 1997. Okay, on the night of March 13th, March 97, our aircraft were involved in normal training missions and had no involvement whatsoever with the lights observed over Phoenix, totally denying that they took off at 3 a.m. And by the way, not only did people see this at 8:30, the jets approach and the craft disappear, but after the jets left, the military jets left, we have civilians that said that the craft, the Phoenix Lights craft, actually reappeared and continued on its way past the airport and South Mountain. So that's number one. Then they say, callers reported seeing lights in the sky, but our staff did not state that the cause was aerial flares. In fact, we don't know where the question of aerial flares came from. Somebody must have put it in their heads.
Right.
This is May, right? Okay.
Right.
Because then, and by the way, they could blow off people's stories, okay, that they saw a mirage, they didn't know what they were seeing, blah, blah, blah. But they couldn't blow away the handful of videos. Again, even though they don't do it justice, the lights justice, they're much smaller, they're white, they flicker, they're not these huge balls of amber light that people described as spinning balls of energy. We have one guy that was right underneath it. I'm looking into, we have the pilot looking into what he called a canister of spinning energy. We have another fellow who was a nurse, an RN, who said that it looked like lava coming down and then shooting straight up, but did not come outside the edge. Okay, very interesting technology. But at any rate, it's very interesting that this FOIA was received in May. And here we have documentation of not only the Air Force jets from Luke trying to intercept one of these craft and the craft totally disappearing, also them trying to reenact. And that really, put a nail in the coffin for flares, even though people still today, hey, if it gives people comfort,
the tracking the time stamping of calls officially of the craft originating the first call logs in Henderson, Nevada, going over to Phoenix, turning south, following the 10 freeway in and over Tucson, even sightings in Mexico, like you said, Texas too as well. And I saw, this was very interesting. I know that I've mentioned this to you before, but to the listeners that have never heard this is so I see this video that was filmed by someone that pulled over on the 10 freeway, saw something in the sky, pulls over on the freeway, shoots a video. It happens to have a video camera, shoots straight up, and you can see the V formation. You can see the stars. You can see this thing moving across the sky. It's the most incredible video. It was about a minute long. All right. I went back. I bookmarked the page. And I went back and I was going to try to make a copy of this video. And back then, video on the internet was tough, number one. Number two, you had to wait for it to load, right? And this video was like this big. It wasn't like, it was a different era, everybody. The internet was different back then. Anyway, I went back. The page was 404 not found. And I thought, the video's deleted? And I searched, and I have looked at every available video of the Phoenix Lights. That video that I saw, I never got a chance to see again. And it was incredible.
And people described. Yeah, like you said, people said the bottom, some people saw gunmetal at the bottom. Some people saw beings very credible people saw beings at the windows looking at them as intently as they were looking back at them. Other people saw, like you said, like when it passed by the moon, they saw it was translucent. I mean,
right.
Who knows it was really a parade maybe of different things, but it's mind-boggling to think about that. And also you mentioned, there's a story that I really should tell because it's so integral to this. I work with Navajo Rangers at I think Stan and Jonathan, who actually had a sighting the day before. They thought it would be big news, and they're so open to it. In fact, 6 months before the mass sighting, I was invited to present my substance abuse prevention education program at the one school that they had at the Gila Bend Indian Reservation, GILA, which is in between South Mountain and the Estrellas, a few miles back. It's very sacred ground. And they don't speak to outsiders. And I helped the principal. And when I looked at my pictures, again, in science, we look for repeatability. And if you look at my pictures, it's just right there. I mean, there's topography that shows there's skylights in a house down the street. And consistently, they're right there where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. So I called up the principal and I said, this was right after the mass sighting. And I had done this presentation 6 months before. And I said, did anybody see strange lights on March 13th? And he started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? And he said, are you kidding me? We've been looking up at them for centuries. We call them sky people, light beings. I had no idea. This is part of, you probably know this. This is part of their culture. They welcome them. In fact, that's how the Estrellas got its name. It means star in Spanish, gateway to the stars. And they believe that there is a gateway or portal in that area. And again, if you look at my pictures over and over again, these unexplained aerial phenomena keep popping up in that area, right where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. And to add to your situation, he had me contact one of the witnesses because he said they see them all the time right above them. Okay. And she got video. And I was supposed to meet with her. And at the last minute, she backed out. And I was like, just good. When she told me she had it, I couldn't go that day. But at any rate, getting back to the story a little bit, just so people understand, it's not just the technology that is awesome and that we haven't seen for 27 years. If anybody's seen this technology, please let me know. But how it affected people in real time and long term is so important. is so powerful. That's why I'm doing the scientific study now, experiencer study, because in real time, we had been so inundated with threat, and harm. I mean, just like 6 months before, the movie Independence Day was huge, right? And even Dr. Gary Schwartz, who's the head of the Conscious Study Department at the University of Arizona, in our documentary makes a very poignant statement that if you're primed to be frightened of something, how do you think you're going to feel if you see that something? But interestingly, children who saw this mile wide or larger V of lights coming towards them were jumping up and down, Independence Day, Independence Day. But as it came closer, a calmness came over everyone, adults and children alike, a connectiveness to the phenomena. We had so many people in our study that actually were given telepathic messages. In fact, I'm working with a PhD psychologist who was a professor at the Owen School of Business at Washington University, and an MD who's in the book, who was traveling up with his family from Tucson to Phoenix to a swim meet. He was in the passenger seat. His wife was driving, and his daughter and a friend were in the back seat. One of these craft was above their car for a long time. He really got a really good look at it and saw a craft with gunmetal bottom and so forth. And the wings were spanning way on each side of I-10. And like, we didn't show the video, but if you ever watch the video, which is on the website, Phoenix Lights Network website, of Kurt Russell, for 2 years, he didn't say a word about it. And as you mentioned earlier, Jimmy, he came in, he saw his partner, Goldie Hawn, watching a show about the Phoenix Lights, and it like rang a bell. And he thought, whoa, it was like he states it as being a close encounter, Richard Dreyfuss moment. Okay. And he looked at his log and saw that he had actually been the one that called in to the tower and had seen it. But anyway, this happened to this MD as well. His wife was given telepathic messages. Nobody said a word to each other. 6 months later, they saw something on TV, and suddenly the floodgates opened up. So there's very curious things that happen with the Phoenix Lights. And in fact, not only in real time, but in long term. People went into the environmental movement, went into the peace movement, just were touched so much. As I mentioned earlier, not only were they in awe and in wonder, and so many cars pulled over, nobody was frightened. And yes, there are people out there that are going to have what they call oncological shock to their system, that is just so out of their realm of reality they can't deal. But the vast 95% or more of our respondents had not only such an awesome experience then, but it's affected the rest of their lives. I mean, they have actually transformed there to a connectiveness. And I also, and this is really important, and I really get into it very simply in the book, but this is important. A number of witnesses, including Dr. Brad Evans, the psychiatrist that's working with me on the study, had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the Phoenix Lights mass sighting. And I found that really, really powerful, because I did too. And I get into it all in the book. But I thought, geez, could there be a connection between all unexplained phenomena? And I don't think we've talked about this, Jimmy, not only in real time and long term, but of connectedness between near-death experience, out-of-body experience, unexplained aerial phenomena that have a mystical light associated with the experience. And lo and behold, when I started looking again, I knew nothing about this topic. At university level, Dr. Kenneth Ring at University of Connecticut, this thick. I don't know if you've ever read his book, but also Dr. Bruce Grayson and Dr. John Mack. My first presentation was at the University of Arizona Medical Center with him, and he was writing a book just about this. Not only does it wake you up, having an experience, an up experience, I started calling all, unexplained phenomena, UP, and up, because the experience itself, no matter what the experience, is very similar. Most profound is the after effect, the awakening, the enlightenment, the connectiveness that one feels to the universe, to the earth, and to each other. that is so powerful. It changes people forever. And we're quantifying it and really documenting it in our study. So I hope anybody that's out there that certainly has seen something similar, or of course, the March 13th, 1997 sighting, please join us in our really vigorous groundbreaking study. Nothing has ever been done like this on a mass sighting level. So soon, and I hope that we can come back and tell you our findings, because they're really riveting.
Now, how did it change Frances Barwood?
She has never changed. She's amazing. And she's getting on in years, and she now lives up in Prescott, and still doing interviews. She really, God bless her. I mean, she really was my idol, because once she came forward, it really gave credence, and anyone that comes forward, including the governor himself and Kurt Russell and others of credence that come forward, pilots and military now and registered nurses and on, that lend credibility to the sighting itself. And she certainly was one of the first, if not the first, to really come forward and make it known that something miraculous happened here and needed to be studied. And that's what we need to do.
Does it take something, and for you it was 1995, but for people to be open to the phenomena, and then suddenly they can experience it, and they experience it more? And that's what I think is a byproduct, a side effect of the Phoenix Lights, is that now you become aware, right?
You just hit the nail on the head. And that's what we're finding with our study over and over and over. And we're finding, over 90% of people that have had a UAP, a true UAP experience, what I call an UP experience, a UP experience, are touched forever. And they're awakened, and their eyes are open to what's before them. I mean, it's so important for me. I mean, look, some people are closed-minded, and that's their choice. They're not going to have the experiences. But once you open your mind and your heart to just acknowledge that something is going on and be open to it, not only will you start noticing things, serendipities, you will probably start seeing things. And I give 10 ways to do that in my book, 10 ways you can connect, because let me just share this, that I had my near-death experience at 8 years old, okay, in a dentist's office, when they gave me ether, which was very, very dangerous. In fact, in 97, after the mass sighting, Dan Rather did a whole story about kids having, ether or other anesthetics and dying, okay. I had a true near-death experience when I was 8 years old. And I won't get into the details. I'll leave that for the reader. But I actually met, and I haven't talked about this because it's not woo-woo. To me, it's as real as I'm talking to you right now. I met 3 giant beings above the earth in glowing white robes, and they had hoods over their heads. And I tried to see their faces, but the hoods were over their heads. I could not see their faces, but I felt their unconditional love for me. They knew who I was. And I had the most incredible experience while I was in this near-death experience. And when I came back at 8 years old, I thought everyone knew the secret. I thought everyone was psychic. I thought everyone was empathic. And I actually kept looking up to see if I could see these 3 beings again. But I felt that they were with me. And I have felt that they have been with me since I was 8 years old. I have people ask me if the 3 lights outside our bedroom window, the eve of my birthday, could have been them. I don't know. But be that as it may, whenever I come to a crossroads, and I'm going to tell you a little story if we have time that I think you'll appreciate, that I just meditate and I ask for guidance. And I always get a feeling, and I've trusted in that feeling. And this includes the Phoenix Lights. I surrendered. I said, hey, because my friends, my close friends, I was saying, why do I have this stuff? I don't know anything about it. I don't want to get involved. Okay. And they would look at me and say, Lynn, you've been doing this for a couple decades. In 76, I was doing health reporting and doing everything from researching and writing and going out in the field and shooting and being on the set with incredible people on NBC and so forth. If anybody can do something incredible with this, you can. And I was like, oh my goodness. The only one that read the 750-page journal, and this did it for me, was our younger son, who I went back to work at the Arizona Heart Institute as the chief clinical consultant of the Wellness and Imaging Center while I was paring down the book to help put him through medical school. He's a neurologist now. And he was home, happened to be home. I said, I don't know what to do with this. Would you mind just reading it? It's just a mishmash of everything. He finished reading the entire thing, the only person that read my 750-page journal, and looked at me and said, Mom, you have to do this. This is too important not to share. And everything you've done has led up to this, from the mouth of babes, right? And it was like, oh, geez. And I actually went out on the balcony and I just asked for God. I said, hey, if I'm really supposed to do something credible and professional with this, and this isn't about me, it's about the data. I did not want to come forward, but show me the way. Just lead me the way. And I have to admit, Jimmy, I mean, the puzzle pieces, just look for yourself. The data speaks for itself. I'm just going with the flow. If it stopped today, I'm good with it. I have my book out there for people to read in its fourth print. I have the documentary, which I hope people will take a look at because it has the real people. I mean, this was shot in 2004, and astronaut Edgar Mitchell is in it. He's wonderful, and a pilot and a 911 police operator, Phoenix police operator, and witnesses. And then, of course, my latest is I'm working on a curriculum, which is very difficult to get in the schools, but I thought, let me get that into a graphic novel activities coloring book for all ages, so that not only teachers can use it in the classroom, which they are. It's 160 pages of the Phoenix Lights story. It's the Phoenix Lights, UFOs, and crop circles activities coloring book, The Adventures of Sue, FO, field observer, and Hugh, HUGH, Hugh FO, and he's a little alien. And I work with the Disney illustrator and map maker, and we have the 10 different craft to color, as well as 80 different crop circles and activities, from easy to rough, with sacred geometry and the answers, so that parents and grandparents can work with their kids. So, as long as that's out there and people can look at the website, which is packed with information, if I could be a credible voice so people actually look at the data, then I've done my job. But that's about it.
Well,
And being
okay.
here with
So,
wonderful people like you and your audience.
oh, stop it. Here's the thing, though. Now that we've got 27 years, we've got data, we've got witness, what is the conclusion that you have come to? Is it us or is it them?
That's a really, really difficult question, because having had the experiences that I've had, there is something that I know personally that's in another dimension. Okay. And that's why ultimately, and it took till the second book for me to share the missing time information, and Dr. Bruce McAbee's 21-page report is on the website, but I do share a bit of it in the second book because, again, I'm a scientist. I mean, maybe it'll help wake people up, because if there is other times and spaces along with ours, then why is it such a leap to think that there are other intelligences in those other times and spaces that we get glimpses of if we're open to them or invited?
Now, that's great, but that didn't answer my question. So I'll ask you again.
Okay.
What do you think?
I don't know.
Is it us or is it them?
Well, why would it be us outside our bedroom window? See, that doesn't make sense to me. Okay.
Don't be a five signing pin.
No, if it was just the lights I'm really not. I hear your question, and I don't know all these years. I mean, if it was just at a distance, then I could feed into a lot more logical explanation that it might be us. But I saw these up close and personal right outside our bedroom window. That's the biggest impact. That's why I wanted to share that with you and the audience, because I saw these things. There was something intelligent, mechanical about what I saw. These cloaked right in front of me, but they seemed like they were still there. Where did they go? So there's something, and I don't know if we can do it. I mean, I don't know. But there was definitely, in my own experience, there is something in other times and spaces around ours. And of course, we've talked, I mean, come on. Now we know that there's, trillions of other galaxies with their own planets and stars. And when a star bursts, it's panspermia. It lets out organic material and oxygen and nitrogen and amino acids and all that. We could have been seeded here by that alone. But we also know with science that with string theory and bubble theory, there could be 10 or 11 different dimensions out there, right along with ours. So whether some scientist or some rogue organization has found a way to come in and out of those different times and spaces, I don't know. But I know
Right.
what I experienced, and that's all I can, and also what I've documented. I've tried to really be as scientific as I could with documenting the facts and let people decide for themselves.
Well, it's so.
That answer your question?
Well, yeah, it does. It does. And let me tell you why. What we always have are the facts. I get that. We have the facts, we have the data. But then behind it somewhere is the truth. Right? And that's what we're presented with. And that's all. It doesn't matter what the subject is, whether it's sports, chemistry, biology, automobile design. It doesn't matter. You've got the fact, or ET in contact, right? You've got the facts in front of you, and then you've got to get to the truth that is behind it. And the facts with the Phoenix Lights, the craft was there. The craft was seen across multiple states and is documented and time stamped, period. So those are the facts, right? That there's no disputing that something was seen all the way from Las Vegas to the Mexico border. There's no disputing that. But what is the truth? What is behind that? That FOIA from John Greenwald is very, very telling. To have the debunking come out and say, it's just flares. The flares did not go from Las Vegas to the Mexican border. So you can take that off. And that FOIA clearly states it wasn't us. It wasn't us, and it wasn't flares. So, okay, so now we have the facts. But what's behind it? What was it? What was the craft? I don't know if it's us or them. I don't. And I still, to this day, Lynn, the fact that I was there and I missed the opportunity to
You're open to it. You'll see something. You'll see something. You're open to it. And I mean, let's be real. I mean, there's so much to this story. There's a lot more that I left out, but the fact is that there are many, many facts that the puzzle pieces keep fitting together. And that's why I ultimately came forward, not only to set the record straight and let people know that they're not alone, that even though most anomalies can be explained, when it's real to you, it's important to share, but also that as a story unfolds, it's so important for more and more credible people to come forward. And hopefully, and that's why I did come forward, to get this out in the open and address it and accept it and study it, so we can find out not only who's driving these things, but also move forward in our own evolution. Because it is part of our own evolution to realize that we're not alone in this universe. I mean, come on, you deal with this all the time. What do you think it is?
See that last night I had on James Beecham, a physicist from CERN. I mean, he was at CERN in Geneva, Switzerland for the interview, right? And very smart guy, very bright guy. But one of the things that we were talking about last night. No matter how far into the woo I go, no matter what I see in the sky, no matter how far I go, I keep getting pushed back to the science side of it. And the science side of it, which you touched upon, the physics side of it, is crazier woo than you and I talk about. Right? the dimensions, the multiverse, and entanglement, the quantum world. It is a crazier. No matter what we try to say, experience or witness, physics is crazier. And one of the things that they talk about, and he talked about this last night, is we observe in our own frequency. We observe and live in our own time, right? So as something else that is existing and living on a different time scale at a slightly different frequency could be right around us right now. We can't witness it. We can't see it. We can't experience it. And that, with the Phoenix lights, is exactly what physics is talking about. Something that appears just for a moment, right? Whether it's hours or minutes or seconds, for us to see, and then disappears. And now,
Exactly.
is that
Yeah,
ET?
yeah.
It could be us in
Well,
another
that's why I
dimension.
shared. Yeah, well, that's why I shared the missing time information finally, because our concept of time is so primitive. Okay, we linear time, past, present, and future is primitive. So if sharing that data with the missing time, I mean, I'm not an astrophysicist. Okay, I don't work at CERN, and maybe some of those people can figure out, what happened with the missing time. Maybe it'll open the door to more scientists looking at that. But the one thing that's really important, besides the technology that is just so far beyond what we've seen here to date, is how it affected the witness. That's to me is so important and poignant, because that doesn't happen with planes and helicopters and
No, it doesn't.
balloons and
No,
flares,
no.
right?
Right. It's a paradigm shift. It's a life-changing event. Just like for you. Let me ask you this. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Again, Lynn, you know how much I love you, and it's so great to have you back on the show, and just a great conversation tonight. And thank you for your contributions to the community. But I wanted to ask you this. Have the amber orbs come back? Do you walk out onto your patio and go, okay, dudes, what's up? I mean, has that continued?
Absolutely. I mean, especially on the Navajo range. Okay. Many of and that's why I brought up the Indigenous peoples worldwide are
No, I
so
mean for
open to me.
you.
And they, no,
Have you?
they have, but some of them believe that these are ancestors or,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
all that. And
yeah.
some people see them in their homes. I haven't had that experience yet. But yes, they have appeared again. I have documented them on film. And yes, I keep an eye out, and I'm very used to what flares look like. In fact, one year, right before the 10th anniversary, right before Symington came forward, the military, for whatever reason, set off a line of flares right before the anniversary. And the news was getting calls, and calling me, are you seeing this? And of course, my eyes were trained by then. And you could see, just looking through a camera, you could see the smoke trails and all, and they were, starting to get uneven. And I said, you know what? This is a perfect teaching moment. I said, if I could do a report to show the difference between flares and the difference between flares and the true unknowns, now's the opportunity. So we actually took that, a couple of the news stations did that, which was really important. So I'm very used to what flares look like and conventional aircraft and so forth. Yes, when they come back, it's very exciting, I have to tell you. And actually, if you, a couple of times, if you look on the Phoenix Lights website photo page, The picture that I took 1 month after 9/11. I mean, that's a story in itself, because, people were freaking out, and it was such a tumultuous time, and it was really scary. And I hadn't seen them, okay, since 97 or 98, excuse me, 98. And I just looked out in the sky and I said, do you know, if you're really out there, do you know what's happening? Do you know what's happening down on Earth? Is there any way that you can help us? Where are you? If you're real, where are you? And suddenly these three lights appear. It's on the cover of my book. And just take a look at it. That picture alone, I would love somebody to tell me what that is. And if you look on the photo page, actually, if you look on the home page and scroll down at the bottom, there is a picture that was given to me from Italy in 1960 of daylight discs that look exactly like the three lights that I got on March 13th, and also the three lights in the picture from 1 month after 9/11. And I mean, there's so much to this story, but it keeps occurring, and you just have to be vigilant. And if you care to, I always tell people, keep looking up. You got to watch where you're walking, but keep looking up. And if most anomalies can, now there's so many things out there. I mean, I do have to say that, between satellites, which a lot of people mistaken for UFOs, as well as drones, and as well as flares. I mean, there's a milieu of different things in the sky now that could be mistaken for anomalous. But when you see the real deal, just like the Phoenix Lights, you just know it. It's not a belief anymore. It's a knowing.
Did you know, and we'll wrap the show on this. Again, thank you. Did you know, right around the corner from your house in Cave Creek in 1958, there was a UFO crash? Did you know that? I went there. I went there, and it's now that corner, and I had read that this had happened. So the disc crashes. The army shows up. They put it on a flatbed. They get it out, and that part's documented. But they later bulldozed and removed the dirt, and then about a year later put a parking lot in the middle of nowhere. Back then, Scottsdale Road, when you went north on Scottsdale, right? That was desert. There were no homes out there.
Are you ready? In 47, near to the Roswell time, okay, there was a disc that actually flew down and actually went into the earth and then went back up. And I think it also went to Cave Creek, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And when we first moved here, I had no idea about this. All I know, we lived at a resort, okay, Point Resort, for 13 years. And right at the end of our street was a giant, I don't know what you would call it, like a cement circle that led under, it used to be 19th Street, and then they changed it to it's a 51 there, to a highway. But there's a huge tunnel underneath, okay? You might not know this, most people don't. Right underneath that, they used to have a 200-horse corral that had hay rides that would go through this tunnel. It was huge, okay? That went through to the mountains on the other side, which used to be Squaw Peak. Now it's Piestewa Peak. And I had no idea that was where the UFO landed.
Yeah, I heard it came in, bounced off the ground, gouged out a big chunk of the earth.
Off the ground, right at the end of our street.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is absolutely nuts. Lynn, thank you so much. We've got Lynn's link is below, phoenixlights.net. The link is below. It's on social media and over on our website. Lynn, enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you so much, and keep doing what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and to your audience as well. Just keep looking up. It's a joy to be with you again. Thank you so much.
Dr. Lynne Kitei, everybody. Perfect show tonight. The Phoenix Lights. Just an absolute perfect show. And her website is thephoenixlights.net, and the links for it are below. All right. Let's see. What am I doing tomorrow night? Does anybody know? What am I doing tomorrow night? Oh, tomorrow night. E.T. Hypnotherapy. Yeah, it's going to be a great show. Fade to Black is produced by Bill J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. That's right. Thank you, Genocide. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Dex. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and this broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night, I want you to be safe. Go Beckley Teppy.